Hi, Karina, is that you?
Yes, Howard, it's me. Thank you.
Over.
And this may the host.
Hello?
Hi, Nadine.
Hi, how are you? There's a feedback.
Hi, good night. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you. How are you doing?
Good evening, everyone. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, good evening.
Hi, my name is Tamoy Campbell. I'll be the host for this evening. I just wanted to apologize for the delay, and we'll be starting at 8:05.
Okay, no problem.
That's all.
Okay.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Evening.
Good night. Can you hear me, Nadine?
Yes, I can hear everybody.
All right.
So good night again, everyone. My name is Tamoy Campbell. I will be the moderator for this evening. I just wanted to lay down a few ground rules. I would appreciate it if we could just mute our mics, especially when Miss Nadine Atkinson Flowers is presenting, just to prevent any feedback, and that we interact as much as possible when the opportunity comes for question and answers. You could post a question in the chat, and I'll try my best to get to them as much as possible and have them answered. and just that we enjoy and just be very enthusiastic. Nothing too hard, just asking for the mics to be muted and to use the chat box as much as possible and waiting until it's Q&A for us to really be interacting as best as we can. Hey everyone, I think it's now 8:05 according to my time. I think we can begin. I would just appreciate it if I could get, if everyone is hearing me, could you just type in the chat a thumbs up or a smiley face, preferably, if you can hear. Great. Okay, I'm seeing some smiley faces. Awesome.
This somebody's screen. I think it's my screen.
So good night again, everyone. My name is Tamoy Campbell, and thank you so much for inviting me to your homes for the next hour to be your moderator. I will not be long because this really is not about me, but it's much about setting the stage for us to understand where the law and business intersects, and that is not going to be my job, but much more for a guest presenter who is anxiously waiting. Hello? Okay, I thought I heard something. Who is anxiously waiting to give her presentation. So I just want Okay, great. So I just wanted us to understand that sometimes I think a jigsaw puzzle might be the perfect way for us to describe what life is like. And many times when we have those pieces together, we might be saying to ourselves, well, I don't know how to put this or to put that. But when we just have more patience and more understanding, we realize that putting them together, that we create a masterpiece. I think in that same breath, business operates in that same way. Different pieces of a puzzle coming together to reap a tapestry of success. But if you miss that one piece, things can go awry and may not be the way that you want them. They may not work as effectively. And many times that missing element or piece happens to be an appreciation and an understanding of what the law is and where it comes in. I think we need to marry the idea much more. And quite frankly, this presentation, understanding that COVID-19 has really birthed that entrepreneurial spirit within many of us. And some of us might be thinking of new ways to secure the bag. We cannot do that without appreciating where the law comes in, because it is a key ingredient. And with that in mind, our presenter, Miss Nadine C. Atkinson Flowers, is going to be the one to just enlighten our darkness and allow us to be more appreciative of where that comes in. But who is she, first of all? Because we have to know just a little more about this amazing, passionate legal savant, I must say so myself. So quite obviously, she is an attorney. She's a proud graduate of UWI and the Norman Manley Law School. She boasts a Bachelor's of Arts degree in history as well as a master's in history. So I think well-rounded, and we'll be getting really good content tonight. In addition to that, having almost 15 years of experience at both the public and private bar, I think we're in for an amazing treat. And she has also been an attorney at the Director of Public Prosecution's Office. So quite a plethora of experience, and we know that we're getting some amazing stuff. In addition to that, she also focuses on immigration law because she actually was called to the US bar. So US immigration is one of the many things on her list, as well as Jamaican criminal law, family, contracts, and real estate, just to name a few, just a few things up her sleeve. And overall, she is an avid reader and has become a lot more appreciative of the Zoom meetings that have been going on and on since COVID-19 has given a new phrase to remote work. Now, I've said a lot, and I will be stopping here right now. I would like us all to please welcome our guest presenter to our virtual stage by typing a star, preferably in the chat, to make her feel also welcome. So please welcome our guest presenter, Ms. Nadine C. Atkinson Flowers, with our stars to the virtual stage, everyone. And please remember to mute your mics as her presentation is being made.
Hi, everyone. Good night, and thank you very much, Tamoy. That was quite an introduction, and I hope I can do it justice. Welcome, everybody in Zoom land. As Tamoy said, COVID-19 has changed so many things for all of us, and hopefully, for those of us who didn't have it before, it's bringing forth our entrepreneurial spirits. For those of us who've been entrepreneurs or serial entrepreneurs, hopefully it's reigniting in you a new area that you might have been thinking about, and know this is the perfect opportunity. I would like to think that one takeaway, one positive takeaway amongst the negatives for COVID-19 is the fact that a crisis can actually promote creativity. And we, as all who are all graduates of UWI or Caribbean people, we know that we are some of the most creative people in the world. And so with that, I thank you for your attendance this evening, and I hope I'll be able to share a bit of information with you. As Tomoy said, if you have questions, you can post them in the chat, and I will try my best to answer them as we come closer to the end, if that is acceptable to you. Now, the topic for the evening is the law and your business. Therefore, we're assuming you are already thinking of business or you are already in business. And as such, this is really just to offer you a few tidbits as to how best you can proceed and make sure that your business is keeping within the law and that the law is actually working for you. And so, the areas that we're going to look at this evening before you start the business. What type of legal model would be best suited to whatever you're thinking about? Then I'm going to focus a little bit on starting the business itself, and then we will also examine paperwork. That's a very mythical topic, but we'll focus a bit on that. We will also look at property, and we will conclude, rightfully so, with growing your business, or if it comes to that unhappy end, ending your business. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how I want us to center our thoughts for the evening. We're going to dream big, and we're dreaming big legally. That's very, very important. I don't think I can say it much better than Nelson Mandela or Denzel Washington. And so we proceed. Now, as you are starting this business, you're dreaming big, because what is now happening is that you are moving from merely an employee and you are going into the uncharted waters of becoming an entrepreneur, or you are perhaps deciding you're going to have what we call a little hustle on the side, or it might be full-time. It could well be that you are deciding to juggle both, or you might make the bold decision to go full-time into the business. But regardless, you're dreaming big. I recollect a few years ago, I met a gentleman who was selling slippers. They were lovely, and most women love slippers or beautiful shoes, and I wanted to get one. So I asked him for a business card because I didn't have the cash with me. And he says, no, I don't have any business card, it's just a little hustling. And that stuck with me because it told me that here was this man who was an entrepreneur. It's quite obvious he was an entrepreneur, but in his mind, he wasn't really in business. And that, I think, resonates with a lot of persons because they feel that they're just doing a little hustling, not a real business owner, perhaps because you don't have a fancy office or you don't have a big sign. But I beg to differ. And so, as I have been saying, dream big, because a real business owner can come in so many forms and so many shapes. Now, what kind of a business model might you examine as you decide to go into business? There's sole proprietorship, there's partnerships. You could register under the Registration of Business Name Act if you are in Jamaica. I am admitted to the Jamaican bar, and so most of what I'll talk about covers Jamaica, but most of the Commonwealth Caribbean countries have similar legal frameworks. And of course, you could decide to dream extremely big and set up your company or your corporation. And so I would want us to look first on the sole proprietorship, the advantages, disadvantages. That's the easiest legal model to set up because it simply means that you're simply setting up shop. There is nothing more and nothing less. You don't need anybody to say that the forms to fill out. You don't need to decide that we're going to do it this way or that way. It is whatever is your decision, because at the end of the day, you are the person who has all the responsibilities as you set up your shop.
Hi, Nadine. Is it supposed to have volume on the audio?
Yeah, we're not hearing anything.
Okay.
And so, as a sole proprietor, you are indeed setting up shop. There are no fees to fill out. There are no forms to complete. There is nothing to file at the company's office. There is only one thing that you need to do, more so than perhaps other business models, and it's to have that drive and enthusiasm. It means too that all of the profits that you might make from your business are yours, but also all of the losses that you might make, you might come upon in the business are also yours. But on the flip side, you will be answering only to you for all your business decisions. You are the one who decides if you're going to expand, if you're going to retrench your profits, all of those things. You are the one who is in charge. Now, this relative lack of formality when it comes to sole proprietorship is quite attractive because, as I've been saying, you can literally start this tomorrow morning. But it's been shown time and again that unfortunately this relative lack of informality is also problematic for sole proprietors, because sometimes when sole proprietors approach financial institutions for loans, the reaction that they get suggests that we would like to loan you some money. However, we would be so much more confident in your business plans or in your business model if it were that you had more formality. If it were you were registered with the company's office, or if it were you had a registered business name, because in truth and in fact, this formality gives financial institutions a little more confidence in the enterprise, a little more confidence in the fact that should the enterprise fail, they will be able to recoup their loans that they would be lending you, because obviously they too are in the business of making money. However, having said that, it is not so much a horrible idea to have some kind of formality, because as a sole proprietor, if it is, God forbid, that you're sued by someone or a company and you lose that case, your personal assets can be called in to satisfy that debt. So whether it's your house or your car or your little money in the bank, all of those can be called upon to satisfy that debt. And you can't be heard to say, oh, but I didn't know that my personal funds that I have will be used for this. That, unfortunately, is no one's problem. It's also important to note that sole proprietors, unfortunately, because they wear so many hats, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, they don't tend to have as good a record system or record keeping system as they could. That's how I'm going to put it. And so you will find that an issue arises and you need to show documentation. But because of the fact that you're wearing so many hats, because of the fact that as far as you're concerned, you are looking after your customers, sometimes you fail to document. And document. That has to be the basis of your business, regardless of how small it is. And it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. You have to see yourself as a business person. You're in the business, but the law of the business is critical to your existence. It's critical to your profits and your bottom line. Now, if it were, for example, that an issue arose and you had no documentation, there is no way that you are going to be able to prevail upon a court without more that you are in the right and the person who has a piece of paper to wave is actually in the wrong. Now, a few weeks ago, as I was preparing for this, I recognized and I saw on a particular website that there were some grants for small businesses and micro enterprises. And so I checked it out. And interestingly enough, whilst it was for small and micro enterprises, they indicated, one, that all applicants had to be registered with the Companies Office of Jamaica or the Department of Cooperative Societies, in Jamaica. That's showing the emphasis on formalization in order to access funding. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that is very important. Now, let us talk a little bit now about whether or not you want to enter a partnership. If it is that you've decided that my friend and I are going to enter a partnership, then that's fine too. There are positives and negatives that you must recognize. Most Caribbean legislation speak of a partnership of between 2 and 20 persons as joining together for the partnership. Obviously, the first real positive about a partnership is that decision-making can be shared amongst the partners. Profit sharing can be shared amongst the partners, but also loss that might come to the company from a financial perspective can be shared amongst all the partners. And that is one advantage that a partnership has over a sole proprietorship. Because as I said before, with a sole proprietorship, clearly, as the only person in the business, everything falls on your shoulders. And you must bear that burden and that responsibility. However, the partnership requires documentation and registration. So you will be required to indicate how many partners there are, what is the profit and loss sharing ratio for the partners, the names of the partners, other details such as their addresses and so on, pardon me, will also be important. You'll also have to indicate if there are general partners, special partners involved in the entity as well. Most partnership acts delineate exactly what is required for a partnership to be legally established in most countries. And most of the partnership acts indicate that there are certain forms and documents that must be submitted, for example, annually, for the partnership's legal status to remain. Importantly though, and perhaps this is the best thing about a partnership, is that you do not have personal liability for the acts and or omissions of that partnership. And so that simply means if you and I are in partnership in a particular business and something happens and the matter goes to court, for example, and we lose the case, our personal assets cannot be called in to honor the judgment that might come against us. That is crucial because it means that you have some level then of comfort in knowing that should the business get into deep waters, it is possible that you're able to re-emerge and hopefully successfully without losing literally your shirt. Of course, as I said, the profits and losses are shared, but those are shared amongst the partners in terms of how much.
Please remember to change the slide.
Yes. Thank you very much. Now, the other form of business entity that I would want to talk about is registering under the Business Name Act. And this slide, I'm sorry, spoke generally about partnership. So we looked at the number of persons, we looked at a little bit about the formalities, the finances, and liability for debts. Now, let's say you don't want to do a partnership and you don't want to do a sole proprietorship. You've decided that you want to register a business name. So you want to trade as the Brothers Grimm or whatever else you have conjured up in your mind as representing what your business is like. Then you need to register under the Registration of Business Name Act or a similar act in your particular case.
Because what's your suggestion now?
Means that there is again much more formality for this particular type of legal model. You obviously are John Brown and you're doing business as Brothers Grimm. However, as you document the entity, you will have to put on the form that you are actually John Brown and that the registered business name is Brothers Grimm. That is important because that is the legal entity that you're setting up. But whilst that legal entity has a separate legal personality, you are the person, or you and your other business partners are the persons behind it. And so it's important to indicate the business name, the address for the business, the type of business that you are going to be going in. And of course, you also need to indicate, pardon me, for the forms that you're filling out, exactly what it is that you're going to be doing. Some persons make it pretty broad so that later on they can go into other areas. Some people sometimes leave it a little more nebulous. So again, they can make changes as they wish. Of course, if there are changes to the business name, you also need to ensure that you complete the requisite forms for that. The final type of business model that I want to look at is that of the company or the corporation. Again, most countries have an act regarding, excuse me, a company and how that is formed. It's important to remember
Excuse
that.
me, Miss Nadine Atkinson Flowers, not to interrupt, but just asking if you could move the slides down, please, because you've moved on to the next topic and we're not able to see.
Yes, can you see the one that says company slash corporation?
Okay.
That's the one I'm on.
Okay.
Right, that's the one I'm on. So the Companies Act, and most countries obviously have a Companies Act, and it spells out with great specificity and great detail exactly how a company is to be formed. One very important formality about a company is that you must, excuse me, comply with all of the terms and conditions that are found in the Act. If, for example, you run afoul of those, you will have, there are always legal ramifications for that. You need to have, for example, your articles of incorporation. Most companies require, well, most Companies Act require that you pay the initial fees to the company's office, or there's a registrar of company's office. One interesting thing that most Companies Act speak about is the prohibition of an undesirable name being registered. That is sort of a nebulous concept, but essentially what it is saying is that, for example, one, you can't form a company that sounds so much like another one that the ordinary man might mistake one for the other. Also, in the realm of an undesirable name are names that persons may consider, or I'll put it this way, right-minded persons might consider to be scandalous or immoral or of such to bring persons into disrepute. I'll put it that way in terms of the prohibition of an undesirable name. The Companies Act regulates companies to a very significant degree. And along with the fact that this is perhaps the most formal of the legal business models for a company, it sometimes is the most expensive initially to set up and to get going, because you have to indicate about your shares. You have to talk about the allotment of the shares. You have to speak about the members who are forming the company. You have to talk about the shareholders' rights. And of course, even though you do not plan to do that at the beginning, you must indicate about winding up, ending the company if it comes to that. Now, we have finished our considerations as to exactly how we are going to set up our business. And we've made our decision and we have got our business plan. So we are ready now to move further. Have another look at your business plan. Think about all of the formalities that we've just talked about and your reminders there. I want to talk now a little bit about your paperwork. And I made that as a catch-all phrase because invariably business persons want to focus on their clients and their customers. And as such, there is little focus on the documentation that is crucially required for the business. The paperwork phrase, I am thinking of these things. For example, you are signing a contract for goods or for services, and essentially you begin working before you have even seen the contract. And you are perhaps in the middle of the contract when something happens and you realize, oh, we did not sign any paperwork at all regarding this undertaking. But that's bad or not so bad. There is the situation where there is no contract at all. we are working by word of mouth. Some of us tend to be very informal in our business dealings, and so we proceed along the handshake and the word of mouth. But of course, something always happens, and it is when something happens that we realize, oh, you know, I did not have a document for that. And I find that the smaller the business entity, sometimes the more likely it is that they will say, oh, I have little time or no time at all to complete whatever documents are necessary. And in fact, sometimes they don't think it's necessary because, for example, a sole proprietor might say, well, I am the one who's making all of the business decisions for my company, for my business. I don't need to write anything down. I have it all in my head. But of course, we recognize that memories can fade, and memories sometimes purposely fade when there is a problem. And so it is important to realize that you are in business, and the business of business requires that you meet your legal obligations to yourself, whilst of course fitting into the legal framework of your country. So there are, to my mind, a few bits of paperwork that you ought always to make sure that you have. There are obviously more, but I'm just focusing on a few that I think perhaps are critical. Contracts for goods and or services bought or sold. Clearly, you will say, but why would somebody have a business and they don't have any paperwork? But unfortunately, it happens so very often. Let's look at a scenario. You have decided to go into business with John Brown for whatever it is. And the contract says at the end of the year, XYZ will happen. For you, you think the year means the end of December, because that would be the calendar year. But John Brown is thinking of the financial year for his company, which is June to July. But there is a third party to this contract, which is a school. And so they're thinking of the academic year. And so we now have 3 different interpretations of one single word, year. And that happens far more often than people would think. You have to make sure that if there's a contract between you and another entity or even another person, it's very clear exactly what we are agreeing on. It can't just be a handshake or word of mouth, because unfortunately, that does not hold up in court. It's important that we recognize that memories will fade, but black and white never usually does. Another set of common contracts, for example, for rent, if you're leasing property, or even if you're buying the property that you're going to be carrying out your business from. Sometimes persons exchange large sums of monies and the paperwork is so very scanty. The contract for whatever it is that's supposed to happen is so very, very bereft of proper attention, and it does not protect you as a business person. It is important, and I don't think I can stress how important it is that if you are going into business, or if you're already in business and you are buying services, selling services, buying goods, selling goods, that there is some kind of written documentation for that. And the longer the relationships, sometimes the more informal business persons become, because we have established a relationship with company A over the years or company B over the years. And as such, we don't need a contract anymore until something happens. So people have to be very, very careful about that. Another type of contract that is always very useful for a business to have, regardless of the size is for employees. If you're a party of one, that's fine. But if you have even one employee, there should be a contract. Doesn't have to be a 1,500-page contract, but it must specify certain basic things. It must specify if it's a part-time worker or a full-time worker, how much you are paying these persons or this person. That's extremely critical. And contracts for employees become problematic because a lot of times when persons are starting out in business, they employ their relatives or their friends. And in employing relatives and or friends, we tend to be a little more informal. And so I will say to my niece or my nephew or my cousin or whomever, just spend 2 or 3 hours a day in the business for me. And I'll give you a little thing at the end of the week. And before you know it, there is some disagreement and you decide to take me to the Ministry of Labor, or you decide that, well, I was supposed to get X and I'm only getting Y. As the business owner, you have nothing to show that this is indeed what we agreed to. And so it is very, very important to remember that you must have some kind of a contract in place for employees. Now, what really should your contract cover? As I said before, it should cover who are the persons who are agreeing, what we're agreeing to. Remember the example I gave you about the year and the 3 different interpretations. It should cover if there's a monetary exchange to take place. And of course, it must be signed and dated. And that's crucial. Because if it's not signed, there's no agreement. Without more, we might have to go to court and the court will have to look at what we did and so on. But who needs all of that stress when you could have simply examined your document and signed? And of course, when it comes to signing, it has to be your authorized signer. So for example, I'm in a partnership with another person. I am away and the other person is sick because they caught COVID-19. And our secretary says, well, you know, this document has to be signed. And our secretary signs the document. And a dispute arises. That document is invalid because she's not one of our authorized signers. And so we may well lose millions of dollars, hopefully we won't, or we may have to pay out millions of dollars. And that's also very important. And of course, if you have done all of these things, you need to ensure you keep a copy of the document, because what good is it if you don't have it? And so I would commend to you that you make sure that after you've done all of these things, and I know you're doing them or you are going to do them, to ensure you keep a copy. And the third one that I'll touch on very briefly is tax-related documents. Now, your tax obligations obviously will have to follow the law very closely, and that will be dictated by the tax regime in your particular country. And so, for example, in Jamaica, when the budget is going to be read, people get a little antsy because we don't know what's coming. We don't know if certain taxes are going to be increased. So you have to keep your ear to the ground, as it were, as a business owner when that's going to be taking place. Now, let's say your business is up and running. You want to ensure that you're protecting your intellectual property. Now, people will say, intellectual property, what? Let's use the example of the gentleman with the slippers. I don't only make slippers. What intellectual property, what exactly are you talking about? Now, intellectual property basically means original creations from your mind. So it could be music, like that great song that I played, or it could be design of jewelry. Let's say you make watches or bracelets. It could be signs that you create. It could be inventions. So you could invent a better pen. You know, they always say necessity is the mother of invention, and we are in COVID, and so many inventive things are happening now that they need to be protected. The intellectual property offices in most jurisdictions offer excellent services and excellent information on how to protect your intellectual property. Copyright is usually the standard because that works for music, that works for books, that works for quite a few things. If you have a design of a particular nature, then you might want to get a patent or you might want to get a trademark. And of course, you may well want to utilize all of the intellectual property rights that are available to you to ensure that you are protected, not only in your jurisdiction, but overseas as well. So we come almost to the end where we're growing our business, or our business might be coming to a natural end because we're a serial entrepreneur and we're moving on to even greener pastures. And so whilst we hope that we live forever, I think we're beginning to realize that that is not so. And so I want to suggest that you operate your business as if it could end tomorrow, and your friends or family might have to step in the gap to sort out your affairs. And so please document, document, document. I don't think I can stress that enough. Now, COVID-19 has shown us all that it is possible to work from home, and that working from home can actually be as productive as when you are in an office setting, in a 9-to-5 setting. However, it means too, though, that we've all been working, well, a lot of us have been working remotely. And in so doing, we have to have access to the internet, we have to have access to our computers. But if your business was one that you were not utilizing the computer system so easily, then it would have been a bit difficult for you to transition from working at your physical location to working remotely. Now, everybody has a phone of some sort that can get on the internet and do all sorts of fancy things. Literally, it could be your briefcase in your pocket. And I would suggest that as you have your hard copies of your documents, you try to also have soft copies of those documents, so that if it is that you have to be working from a remote or another location for a substantial period of time, then at least you will have the documents that you need. And of course, you will ensure that the necessary encryptions are in place to safeguard the privacy of your clients, the privacy of your financial records, and to ensure that your clients, as well as the persons who you're working with, can feel that their privacy is being protected and that confidential information is not being inadvertently disclosed. I want to leave you with just a little checklist. You have decided on your business model, and you are going to be completing any formation documents. Now, before you go into business, what are you going to call it? You need to register a business name. Do you know the best type of legal formation for your business? What documents will you need? That's always very crucial. Does it make sense to get to the company's office and you realize that the most crucial document, you didn't complete it at all? Are there labor laws that you need to be aware of regarding the persons who you may or may not decide to employ in your business? The whole business of taxes and whether you need a particular taxpayer registration number for the business as opposed to the one that you use for your personal life. That's important. And of course, we want to stay in business. And you consider the contracts that you enter into and how best to ensure that those protect you, because that's what it's there for. And are there any professional services or licenses that you need? For example, if you are going to be setting up your entity as, let's say, a barber shop or food handlers, you need food handlers permits, that kind of thing. And of course, you cannot forget about the tax man. Are there tax obligations that you need to ensure that you're fulfilling? I hope that you've enjoyed the session and that I have offered you a few food for thought. And if you want, I can take a few questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for an amazing presentation, Miss Nadine Atkinson Flowers. I think everybody really appreciated it. And I think now is the time for Q&A. So I'll be just fishing some of the questions. I noted one here. Can copyright in one country be applied in another? So for example, can the copyright in Jamaica be enforced in Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, as I said, I'm admitted to the bar in Jamaica, and therefore, I do not wish to be accused of practicing in Trinidad. But as far as I'm aware, if you were to go to JIPO, which is the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office, and get your, your copyright for whatever it is, they will be able to advise you on how best to copyright it in other countries. There is also the World Intellectual Property Organization, which is WIPO, and they have, I know, a register that offers some protection in more than one country. So it would be prudent for you to check out those two websites because since it's COVID, well, obviously you wouldn't be able to go, especially to JIPO now. But certainly it is possible to protect in more than one country.
Thank you. Another question we have, what are the type of documents that you were referring to? I think this was when you were at the point of the presentation and you were talking about the Companies Act and Companies Act and registering. Somebody wanted to know the documents they should have.
Well, for registration of the business name, there is a form, I believe it's called the BN1. You can access it online, or you can go to the office and get a copy, and you would complete that form and submit it. The fee is fairly small. I can't remember exactly how much it is, but it's a fairly small fee to register the business name. For the registration of a company, that is far more expensive. Those fees, perhaps maybe 20,000 Jamaican dollars, it depends. But you have to have your articles. You have to have your shareholder agreement for the Companies Act. You have to have information in there about winding up procedures, and winding up, as I said at the beginning, means that the company is ending. You're not saying the company is ending because it hasn't really started, but in the event that it does end, these are the steps that you will be taking to do so. So the Companies Act literally guides you as to what is to be done from the start of the business to the end of the business.
Okay, thank you. The questions keep coming in more and more. I am seeing one. Let me read one that I got. What is the difference between trading as the business name? Can you explain the business type where there is a parent company and subsidiaries?
Let me take it from there's like 2 or 3 separate questions there. So give me that first part again.
Okay, 1. What is the difference between trading as the business name?
Trading
that
as
I got.
Business name. Well,
yes.
I think there may be a little disconnect because in Jamaica, we say John Brown trading as, let's say, as I said, Brothers Grimm. In other countries, they will say John Brown doing business as Brothers Grimm. So the essential thing is that for the business name, you are not using your name at all. You are simply putting up and giving notice to the world that I, Nadine Flowers, am now selling, let's say, for example, Christmas cakes. And my Christmas cakes, it's called Christmas Creations. But the person behind Christmas Creations is Nadine Atkinson Flowers. And everybody needs to know that. And so in order to protect the public, I must indicate that I am the person, I am the personality or the persons behind Christmas Cake Creations. So that is exactly what it means when you say you're doing business as or you're trading as. And the second part you were asking about, I think, parent and a subsidiary. She's muted, but I think she was asking about a parent and a subsidiary. Tamoy, are you back?
Yes, I'm back.
Yes,
So
you were asking.
glitch.
That's fine.
The next part was, can you explain the business type where there is a parent company and its subsidiaries?
Parent company, for example, and a subsidiary. A parent company might be one that's incorporated in a jurisdiction where they get, let's put it this way, good tax benefits. And they're working in another country. Let's say, I'm trying to think of a good example without getting myself into any problems. Let's say company A is incorporated in Delaware, United States.
Okay. Okay.
And they are in the business of selling shoes, but they want to now sell shoes in Jamaica. Okay. What they will do is to set up company A1, which is under company A. That's the subsidiary. Company A1 is going to be selling the very same shoes that company A is selling in Delaware, United States, but that's being done in Jamaica or in some other country. And it is called a subsidiary because it really has this parent-child relationship with the company that is incorporated. The subsidiary is really to protect the overall parent company. It has its own legal identity in Jamaica, but truly it is part and parcel of company A. But it could not set up business in Jamaica simply by just opening a store or opening the doors for business. We recognize and we realize that a company, if it wants to do business in our country, must of course adhere to our laws. And so they would have to set up a subsection, as it were, of the company.
Okay. Another one, which business model would be best if you want to go into becoming a landlord, for instance, renting apartments to tenants?
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Well, it might well depend on how much exposure you can handle, because let's think of a scenario where, for example, something happened to a tenant on your property. There have been cases where, for example, landlords have rented to their tenants and something has happened to the tenant on the property in what is called, let's say, the common area. The landlord is going to be deemed responsible for that. And he may not have enough funds if he's just a sole proprietor to deal with that exposure that might come. Let's say, for example, and I think this one is probably quite current, there's so many cases of persons being bitten by dogs and, you know, being mauled and those kinds of things by dogs. Let's say, for example, I am the landlord. I have a house which, or a big yard with, let's say, 3 houses in it, and there are dogs in that property, which may well belong to me because I use them as guard dogs to secure the person of my tenants. And one of those dogs were to bite the tenant. and the tenant decides that he's going to take me to court. Can I afford that exposure myself as a sole proprietor if something was to happen in court and the judge decides that, well, you, Mrs. Flowers, as the landlord, you are liable for the injuries to John Brown because of what happened. So you have to think about the type of exposure. But as I said, if you start out as a sole proprietor, and lots of persons do that, you just have to make sure that as best you can, you adhere to some formality yourself. Meaning if you're going to be doing business with other entities, you have your contracts. And perhaps in a year or two, you can afford to have a partner. And not all partners have to be equal. You can be 50-50, you can be 60-40, you can have 3 partners. I could have 70 and the other 2 share the 30, or whatever works best for you. So sometimes it's not simply a matter of what's the best business model. You have to think about all of the ramifications. I unfortunately like to always look further down the road, because now things are rosy and we're all fun and friendly, but when relationships sour, as they inevitably do because we're human, we get into problems.
Understood. I'm going to ask you this next question, and then I'm going to allow the persons in the chat to answer, so they cannot have an opportunity to interact. So Neil Anderson asked earlier, you spoke of grants available for businesses. Where can this information be found, and are these grants industry specific?
Okay, there was one that I did find, and that was actually, let me tell you, because I did make a note of it. I found one on the GIS website. I'm making no plug for the GIS, but that's where I found it. They were advertising grants for, it was titled Grants for Small and Medium-Sized Tourism and Agriculture Enterprises. And I was struck by it because whilst we recognize that in the tourism industry, there will be some micro players, they did ask that you are either, excuse me, registered with the company's office, or you also have a registration with the Department of Cooperatives and Friendly Societies. So that is one that I did find.
Okay, Nell Pears asked, do subsidiaries have to be of the same business type as the parent company? Example, if the parent company sold shoes, as you mentioned, and you wanted to expand under a different field, such as food, would an entirely new company need to be established, or can it be a subsidiary?
That is why I mentioned in the beginning, well, further up in the presentation, that when you're doing your articles, you can make it so wide that you can literally decide tomorrow morning, we are going to be expanding into food production. And that's why, for example, big companies tend to have multiple areas that they're involved in and involved in successfully. But when they were setting up the articles of incorporation or the articles of association, they said, we can do clothing, we can do jewelry, we can do food, we can do technology. And that is how you grow your empire. So I guess the short answer is you don't have to.
Okay, time is really creeping up on us, so I'm only going to squeeze in 2 quick ones, and then we'd have to wrap up our session. Victoria Francis asks, what location options for the business does one have when your business is online with no physical space?
What? I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Okay, what location options are available for the business if you are operating online with no physical space?
Now that is one that I haven't truly considered. I think, and note, I think, in such a situation, if you were going to be, let's say you were registering, doing business as a Brothers Grimm, you might well have to put your personal address, because I believe across practically every jurisdiction, if you are going to be formalizing your business structure, you have to have some kind of physical address, because one, you will need to get documents from the company's office, for example, to remind you that annual returns are due. You will have to submit your filings and so on. So I am going to say, even though I have not thought about it, but it is a very good question. And we are moving into the virtual world. So that is really a great question. I would say it would perhaps be that you would have to put your personal address for such a business.
I have one question for you, Ms. Nadine Atkinson Flowers. Is it possible for us to, for myself and Ms. Dice, to collate some of these questions and could possibly email you so that person may get a response? Because time is really precious.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have no problems with that. I think my email is at the bottom. And, you know, whilst we wouldn't establish any attorney-client relationships, I am willing to answer questions. That is not an issue.
Awesome. So for everyone who possibly didn't get an opportunity to have your questions answered now, there will be an opportunity, because we have been so gracious enough to give you the contact for Ms. Atkinson to kind of get you on the page that you just deserve. So I want to just thank you all so much for tuning in. It is now 9:05 Jamaican time, and you've been an amazing, amazing, amazing audience. You've been very interactive, and I want to also remind you to please, if you want to have the video recording, you can just look back in the chat. Miss Dice would have sent her email address that you could go and get that and request it. I think, just to reiterate, I think we learned so much. I think we understood that sometimes business has to go beyond the informal approach, and we have to take our things seriously. I remember you said something about the business is sometimes moving from that and being more black and white, writing on the paper, understanding the weight of the signature and all the nuances, that really, if you want to take yourself to the next level, you have to think seriously, act seriously. And you've just given us all the information that we need, because for us, maybe we thought it wasn't accessible, but no, right here on Zoom, we had it right in front of us, and we are so grateful and so full. I think everybody thoroughly enjoyed it, and if so, I'd really appreciate some smiley faces in the chat box. Remember, you can send your additional questions to Miss Dice, and she has placed it in the email address. Smiley faces, please. Ms. Nadine Atkinson Flowers, thank you so much. You were amazing, amazing, amazing. I thank you so much for sharing your information with us as a law student. I also found it very informative. So I thought that, for me personally, you really left with me with some nuggets of truth and inspiration. And everyone, thank you so much for being an amazing audience. It was a pleasure being your moderator, and thank you so much for spending the evening with us on Zoom.
Thank you very much for having me, and the pleasure was mine.
Thank you. So you guys, so everyone, you may, you know, if you're so minded, to leave the chat as you please.
Thanks very much, Nadine.
Oh, you're welcome. You're more than welcome. Take care.
All right, bye.
Indeed, thank you. Thank you very much.
Welcome. Take good care now.
Thank you so much from Trinidad.
I hope you're well there in Trinidad.
Very well. Thank you so much.
Have a good evening, everybody. Take care.
Thank you so much from Belize.
Have a good evening.
Thank you so much from Guyana, Nadine.
Okay. Nice to have a Guyanese on the chat.
Yeah, thank you.
Here now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you from Belize also.
Bye.
Tamika from Trinidad, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, keeping safe in Trinidad. Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Have a great evening, everybody.
watching as a Jamaican from Japan. So this is great. Thank you so very
Oh
much.
my God, from Japan. Wow.
Yep.
We are everywhere, aren't we?
Yes, we are. Thank you so much. I really appreciated this.
Not a problem at all. Take good care and join us again.
Definitely will. Thank you. Bye.
Lucia saying thank you. Good night.
Good night, everybody. Have a good one.
Hi, Nadine. Good night.